All right, welcome everyone to another edition of Deconversion Stories. Sorry, you're going to hear me do that a lot today because we moved our band practice back to Friday nights, which is cool because it sucks getting up early on a Saturday after being up late on a Friday and having to go to band practice in the morning. So it was the only time we were all able to get together until recently when my lead guitar player actually had a shift change where he works. So we can now go back to Friday nights, which is awesome. Anyway, so today we're chatting with my new friend here, Kerry, and we're going to be talking about, of course, his deconversion, and we're also going to be talking about the victim services of SDG&A that he started up a little while back. When exactly did that happen?
Well, I'm actually a member of that organization. They are part of the Police Services Act here in Canada.
Gotcha.
We're required to have a victim services unit to help victims of violent crime. That's how policing is in Canada. It's a little different, I think.
Right. And for some reason, I had it in my head that you started this organization, but you're just a member.
Yeah, I'm a crisis responder with them, so I go out into the field and handle people who are in crisis.
That's excellent, by the way. That's awesome. Good. That's good on you, man. Very much appreciate that. I don't worry, folks down there in the U.S. We still have issues with some of the police up here too. Don't worry, but we are able to handle it a little bit differently and a little bit better, I think, than some other places. Anyway, so Kerry, welcome to the show, man. Great to have you on.
Thank you for having me,
fellow Canadian, by the way.
Oi.
Oh man.
Yeah, you're outnumbered, Mikey. But don't worry, we'll make you a Canadian. We've already made you an honorary Canadian, anyways, Mikey, because you live close enough. So, anyways, Kerry, what I do here is I chat with folks about how they left their former beliefs behind, and I always ask them to sort of take us on that journey with them, and you'll probably see me, put up my hand or something once in a while if I have any questions. And Mikey will do the same thing because he's now my co-host, official, not just the producer, but he's also the official co-host of the show. So we are going to be changing all the logos and stuff up in the future. And I'll get into that a little bit towards the end of the show, asking folks again out there to come up with some artwork for us. And there will be some prizes and some cash involved, folks. So stay tuned. Anyway, Kerry, why don't you take us on that journey, and then we can talk a little bit after that about your involvement with the victim services.
Sure. You'll have to forgive me as well. I just got off shift, so I'm a little groggy in my head. So
gotcha. I'm always groggy in my head, so don't
worry. The thoughts are not for me. So basically, I was born and raised as a Jehovah's Witness, and that was my entire existence for the first about 30 years of my life.
Wow.
Typical witness kid. You go to the meetings, multiple times a week. You're engaged in field ministry as part of being a member of Jehovah's Witnesses. That's expected of you. You're supposed to learn how to do public speaking. You're supposed to learn how to be an effective minister. And then you either are just sort of a general member who just does the minimum amount of time and goes to the meetings and tries to conduct yourself in a certain way, or you start to take it a little more seriously, and you start to get extra privileges within your individual hall and organization. And the very annoying part about that is that once you actually leave the organization and you try to describe what it is that you're doing, the only people you have sort of a comparable experience with are former pastors and members of the clergy. But it was very frustrating because it didn't matter what duties or responsibilities you had. Even if you were in charge of an entire congregation, you weren't allowed to refer to yourself as a clergy member in the Jehovah's Witnesses, because there were no clergy. We were all brothers and sisters in God. But that wasn't actually the case, and everybody there knew it. That there were people that were in charge. There were people that were constantly talked about being in charge of, like, the field service minister who's responsible for giving people territory to do out in the field service work on the weekends, or the service overseer that does that, or even I don't think they call them the presiding overseer anymore. It's been a while, but there was always one
Sith Lord, maybe.
Sith Lord would work, but
Yeah.
just one brother who was told to be like, you are the presiding overseer for this congregation, and all matters must be filtered through you, sort of thing.
Gotcha.
And then there
He
were
was
other
the Senate.
yeah. I mean, and the worst thing about it is that we were always being told not to rumor or be gossip mongers or whatever you'd like to call it. But
Yeah.
sometimes it was
Good luck.
the wives of the presiding overseer that were the worst for their gossiping and their feeling of elitism and stuff. And the politics was real, and
Right.
it was obvious if you opened your mind to it. But if you didn't, if you just accepted that this was normal, this was the way it was supposed to be, then you didn't necessarily question it. You tried to embrace it, which is something that happened with me in my life, is that I started getting encouraged to pursue a very specific path of public speaking, of ministry. After what's called a circuit overseer came and visited our Kingdom Hall and encouraged me to seek that path. So that was the focus of my life for decades, was this idea of advancing up a chain of clergy that doesn't exist, that eventually would result in a position where I would travel around to different congregations in our district and help with the organization of the organization itself. But that plan kind of derailed at one point, because I started recognizing that the things that I had accepted as capital T truth, and witnesses were always very big about using the term truth, like they had the truth and no one else has the truth. And it irked me, because it didn't seem as though what the scriptures were claiming, that by applying scriptural principles in your life, that you would start to manifest what were known as the fruitages of the Spirit, where love, joy, peace, long suffering, mildness, goodness, faith, self-control, that sort of thing.
Right.
But the most important of them being love. And I couldn't reconcile the square circle that I was being presented with, in which that was the people around me in the world, these worldly, godless people, who were the more
Shame
loving,
on us.
who were the more loving types than the ones I was dealing with on a regular basis.
Right.
And this is a trigger warning for anyone who may be listening, but Jehovah's Witnesses have a bit of abuse problem in their organization, because the nature of power dynamics is if there's an imbalance of power, it's a opening for abuse to occur. And they have a patriarchal hierarchy. The man is the man of the house. The woman does as she's told, and the children do as they're told. And this is professed to be a good thing. Children, be obedient to your parents in all things. This is what you're told. There's no room for interpretation there. Be obedient in all things. And so your parents, whatever your parents say, you're supposed to be doing. And as a result, that's rife for parents or people who have children to be abusive of those children. And the witnesses have more doctrine and dogma and policy and procedure that make it very difficult to deal with that abuse and getting out of that abuse, including something rather reprehensible that they've been cited by legal agencies around the earth for, that children who come forward and claim that they've been abused have to provide 2 witnesses that have seen the abuse,
right,
or else they're not believed. And what's worse is that there's often backlash that can occur,
fallout,
if they can't produce 2 witnesses that have witnessed the abuse that has occurred. And how often are there really 2 people who see that kind of abuse? And so it's a perfect haven, a perfect power imbalance for predation of children and even spousal abuse. And it'll be one of those conversations that sisters will have amongst themselves before they ever get married to a brother, is like, what's his reputation? Has he been involved with anyone else? Is he known for being angry? Is he abusive? That sort of thing. So they'll do their own filtering. as though that's completely normal in an organization that prides itself on, not having these problems or claiming
Capital T truth.
Yeah,
claiming that they
So
don't have the
claiming it.
problems. Yeah.
and all the issues you ever have as a kid when you're being raised in an environment like that, all the questions that come up into your mind that never truly get answered, you learn the apologetics to keep those questions silent in your head, or just like, well, yeah, that's natural, that perfectly makes sense. If I accept this presupposition, of
Right.
course this makes sense, And then at some point in your life, for me, I came to a crossroads where I decided I truly cared to learn what truth was, not what it was being dictated to be. I figured truth, if it was truth, could be determined without bias, without dogma telling you what was truth. You could figure it out on your own, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And the definition of true that we use in common parlance is that which is in accord with reality. But the idea of truth that is used in religions is this Platonic idea that truth is sort of gleaned down from God. This
Sure.
this third state of existence, that a Platonic ideals exist in.
Right.
And we're seeing mere shadows of the real world, and so it's by God's grace that we see truth at all.
Right.
It's a gift from him, which is very dehumanizing to be told constantly that you're not supposed to rely on your own understanding, as it says in Isaiah. And the wisdom of man is foolishness in the eyes of God. It's constantly this beating you down that you shouldn't be trusting your own reasoning, that you should be waiting for God to reveal truth to you. Even if you have questions and doubts, you should sit silently and wait for truth to be revealed. And it's a perfect control mechanism, because any questions you have are seen as a failure on your part to be humble enough to have God's, clarity come to you,
Right.
And eventually I had enough. It was just not possible for me to reconcile being a part of an organization that was clearly being so unloving that it was a mockery of everything I understood love to be.
Right.
And I had gotten married at the time, and my ex and I both left at the same time together. And we went through the very difficult work of attempting to rebuild a worldview from the ground up, after having only ever had to worry about just regurgitating one that we had been taught. And it was a very difficult process. My deconversion probably took me, it's difficult to say in many ways. It took about 5 years for certain. It could have happened it would have been maybe 10 years in total, from about 2005 to 2015.
Okay.
But it was a slow process where I basically had to give myself permission to question what I had been told. And that was a big no-no. That was not something you were supposed to do. If you had questions, you were supposed to wait for clarity to come. You were supposed to pray. You were supposed to do research in all of the publications the society comes up with. And this was not what you were supposed to be doing, put it that way. But I dared to allow myself to look into the information on my own. And one of the people I stumbled across eventually was Christopher Hitchens. And I was hearing a lot of his bold-faced blasphemy.
Yeah.
And it irked me
Matt Hitchens.
because I wasn't ready yet to say that it was all untrue.
Right.
And he was so in your face about it, that I got it into my head that I was going to form the perfect arguments against everything Hitchens had to say. I was gonna go to conventions. I was gonna hunt them down. I was gonna challenge them publicly. You name it. And I was on a mission, and that mission lasted only so long until I realized he was right. And then suddenly I had those epiphany moments where I realized, well, if this was wrong, what else is wrong? How far down does the wrongness go? and I started studying philosophy, the history of religion. I mean, even more than the study of religion that I had to do for my ordination to become a minister, which was a pretty grueling 100 question test, an oral test that you had to answer completely from memory. So
What?
yeah, it was very interesting, and you weren't allowed to get any wrong. You could get maybe one question wrong, but if you got any
I'd
more,
fail that totally.
yeah,
I don't have a
you had to
memory.
study hardcore to pass that test.
Right.
So, but this was my life. I had embraced it. I was a pretty good public speaker, and so I was always being encouraged to keep going down the path that I was going.
Sure.
Keep accepting new responsibilities. Keep being of service to God. You know, and whatever you do, don't do anything to bring shame to God's name.
Oh yeah.
And so coming forward about abuses that you've seen, well, that's bringing shame on God's name, you know, and or abuses you've experienced personally. I mean, my family was an incredibly abusive family, very toxic. All of my siblings and I have had damage for years that we've had to learn how to deal and heal with.
Oh wow.
And some of my siblings are still in the faith. They're still sort of trapped in it.
Right.
My sister told me when I came out to my sister, I have a full sister, a half brother, and several stepsisters and a stepbrother, and it's a combination of two different families. And when I went to my full sister, who I told my position, that I didn't believe anymore, she basically just sent me one reply back saying that she would always love me, but she will always love God more. And so she wasn't going to communicate with me. And that's what witnesses do. They shun.
Yes.
So, and it's very...
There's a name for it, right? Like
shunning.
Or disfellowship?
Yeah, disfellowshipping is when you're sort of kicked out, and disassociating is when you sort of just leave, But either way, it's not a healthy thing, because they push the privacy so much that you're supposed to only have witness friends and only hang around with witnesses.
Yeah.
You're supposed to shun everything of the world. No worldly attachments if you can avoid it.
Right.
The threat of being shunned means that everyone that you know, everyone that you communicate with, your family, your friends, they all die in one day.
Right.
And will have nothing to do with you. That's a hell of a lot of social pressure to conform. And it's a terrifying thing to think that you're going to have to go through the rest of your life with literally no one, and that you don't make friends with from that point forward. And that keeps a lot of people in line through all of the questions they have.
Speaking of which, there was a quick question from my friend Randolph, who wanted to know how many arguments did you prepare before realizing Hitchens was correct?
Well, a lot, actually. One of the things that witnesses pride themselves in is that they don't follow the Athanasius Creed of the Council of Nicaea that led to the formation of the church.
Just for some viewers maybe that don't know what that is, what would you say to that? I mean, I know.
The Athanasius Creed was the first Council of Nicaea was ordered by Constantine because of the conflicts that were occurring within the realm. And he basically ordered them to solidify a standard dogma. And the first debate that happened at the Council of Nicaea was between Athanasius and Arianitis over the nature of Jesus.
That's the one right around 325, right?
Something like that, yeah. And Athanasius eventually won out in that debate. And that became the dogma, that Jesus was to be considered God, part of the Godhead.
Right.
Where Arianitis basically said, no, he's like a prophet, a guru, a servant of God,
right? The
firstborn of all creation, that sort of thing. And so they don't hold that Jesus is God. Okay. And I thought that the avenue of debunking a lot of what Hitchens said was centered around the idea of showing that everything he had heard about religion, about Jesus, about God was wrong.
Right.
If only he had been raised as a witness, he would have understood what the true matter, was about things. And so I was going to launch into an entire apologetic, like the love doctrine and everything. It was like everything God does is for our benefit. We just don't necessarily know how, So we're supposed to sit there and figure this stuff out, and or not figure this stuff out. We're supposed to be more humble than he is willing to be. And then I kept looking into it and realized I didn't have any justification for using the term truth the way I was using it, because that's not how people used it normally.
Right.
And so if truth wasn't what I thought it was, what was truth? And there you go. The snowball started. And so technically here I am.
So, well, first of all, real truth is always demonstrable.
Yes.
I mean,
it's in accord with reality. So reality is consistent. That's how we define what reality is. Is this consistent stuff around us that we don't have the ability to think of and control with our thoughts, like we can with our own Kajito, our own self. And there's that delineation that occurs.
Sure. And Randolph also said, this one here with the demand for conformity is one of the characteristics of religion I've been criticizing for decades. And he appreciates you mentioning the problem because it ties into causing feelings of shame.
Yes. That was one of the big things for a long time, is that shame, fear, guilt, those were all very, very big emotions. And they lend themselves into a kind of imposter syndrome.
Yeah.
When you just keep pushing and you just keep pushing and ignoring your doubts and your questions, you start feeling like you're not really you anymore. There's this facade that you've put forth that's keeping all of the questions quiet.
Is that kind of what happened to you in essence?
Oh yeah, very much so. I couldn't square the circle. I couldn't figure out how it was possible for such an abusive structure to result in the abuse that it did, and damaged like all of my siblings and myself for so long. And yet somehow this was from a God that was loving, that was love, by definition was love, was the embodiment of love. His very act of creating the universe was an act of love, because he recognized how wonderful life was for himself. And so he wanted to share that experience with and other entities. So that was the reason God created everything. You had to look at everything through this lens, that it was just some great mosaic of omnibenevolence, and it didn't add up. The proof wasn't there. It wasn't. His followers weren't loving. The people around me were good people, but they weren't good people because of the doctrine they were being taught. They were good because they were good people.
Right.
But they were never allowed to give credit to themselves or take credit for anything.
That's what I've always said. Any
level of pride was considered, like self-respect was dismissed as a concept, and it was only pride. So you should never take credit for something like that.
Yeah, well, I've always said, good people will be good people, bad people will be bad people, but it takes something like doctrines from religious belief to make otherwise good people bad people.
Right. And that was one of the things that I kept seeing, is that the sacrifice of Abraham. Many people are aware of witnesses and their position on blood transfusions. And the nuts and bolts, when you break it right down, is that if it was necessary for you to let your child die, you had to be open, not just open, but completely willing to allow that to happen.
That's horrifying to me,
because that's what God wanted. If the death of your children was what was necessary to prove your loyalty, then your children die. And
what about the kid?
Well, that's the sacrifice of Abraham. He was asked to show his willingness to be a servant of God, and he was asked to sacrifice Isaac, and God had to send an angel to stop him from plunging the dagger. So anything less than that willingness to let your children die was just seen as weak faith.
And why do they think blood transfusions are bad?
Well, there's a scripture in the Bible about abstaining from blood. But the idea being is that you weren't supposed to eat the blood of the sacrificial animals that you had. But they've expounded upon that idea to the nth degree to mean like rejection of medical treatments like blood transfusions. They softened on maybe a couple decades ago and started allowing partial blood transfusions, which was blood fractions. You can divide blood up into platelets and plasma and like heme and stuff like that. But and so it became a matter of conscience that they will allow people to accept plasma or platelets or something like that. But
so I guess none of them are blood donors then.
No, actually, they're not. That was one of the joys that I had when I left, is that I became a donator. And,
awesome.
It was actually a really cool experience to realize that I was
saving lives.
I was saving lives.
Yeah.
So
I started a Partners for Life group here.
Organ donor as well.
Excellent.
So, on my death, 8 people survive.
Well, I became one too, but I'm pretty sure my organs are going to be pretty useless by the time I'm gone. But
they'll take your bandana.
They'll take my bandana. Yeah. I started a Partners for Life group for blood donors. I can't donate because of the anticoagulants that I'm taking.
Oh,
these little guys right here are keeping me from donating blood. But I can still do it for research purposes, and UBC is going to let me know when they'll be accepting donors for that again. So I could get back into that. But
one more question from the chat. They were wondering where in Canada do you reside?
I am in Ontario. I am sort of between 2 major cities, Ottawa and Montreal. I'm about an hour from both of them. So I'm sort of in the country on the St. Lawrence River.
Okay.
And
cool.
So I can travel to a major center pretty quickly if I want, or I can just chill out here in the country.
Nice.
Sounds nice.
I haven't been that part of Canada yet. I mean, I've been to Toronto, I've been to Ottawa, I've been to Montreal, been to Halifax, and been, a bunch of different places, but there's still so much of Canada I still kind of.
Oh, it's huge. You could spend your entire life traveling everywhere here and not see it all.
Yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I have no desire to go to Winnipeg though. So, unless of course, I want to go see my niece at her college or university or whatever. But I think she's done with that pretty soon. So,
don't you want to see where the ice giants are from?
The ice giants, the frost giants.
Where the frost giant nurseries are in Winnipeg.
That's where Thor banished them all to.
Yeah, they all live up there.
All in
Things begin to make sense now.
Making glaciers.
That's right. That's why you don't see the frost giants running around anymore, folks. They've been trapped up in Winnipeg. But no. I mean, you go there, and it's funny because you see people from Winnipeg, or I'll call it Winnipeg, and you see them go to other Canadian cities, like in the winter and stuff like that, and they're walking around in t-shirts, and it's like -20, but they come from an area where it's like -50, -60. So to them, that's fucking summertime. So
I polar bear dip. So whenever we break the ice off the river, you just sit there and wade into the ice cold water. It feels really good.
Yeah, I've done that here a couple of times, but it doesn't get as cold here, of course. But we do in January. They do I think it's New Year's Day or something, or the day after New Year's, they do the polar bear swim here.
Typically New Year's Day, there's usually there's usually a dip going on somewhere on New Year's Day.
Yeah. It's a lot of fun. I haven't done it probably since the 90s, but because I'm afraid now I'd probably just jump out of there going, holy crap, and run across the water like
Nah, it only takes a few seconds and you go numb, so you're all right.
That's what I'm afraid of. That's when hypothermia sets in. Yeah, but that's okay. We only went in there for a few minutes at a time anyway, so not a big deal. But it was a lot of fun to do because you have a couple of beers afterwards while you're shivering your ass off on the shore.
Yep.
But it's a lot of fun. Yeah. Air, one of my buddies in the chat there, is also in Ontario, but Northern Ontario. So, yeah.
Yeah, well, I'm from Northern Ontario originally.
Okay.
Up near the Great Lakes, there's an island called Manitoulin. And like there's a city north of it, Sudbury, and North Bay and stuff where Northern Ontario really is. But I grew up in a very remote area on that island, Manitoulin. And for example, the congregation that I grew up in only had 20 people in it. The town only had about 400 people living in the town. So this was a very small community. And my congregation being so small led me to the opportunity to, even as a very young kid, get privileges in the hall that ordinarily would not have occurred until I was much older. Because that's just how it is in a small congregation. You do more talks, you give more sermons from the stage. You get to be an assistant for more projects, that sort of thing.
Right.
And so my entire life was wrapped around my faith because of all the situations I found myself in, being a member of a small community, small congregation, that sort of thing. And it seemed perfect to me. It was the only goal that was put forth to me. My earliest memory was being at the Kingdom Hall. The only course of life action that my parents ever gave me was telling me I was going to be a minister when I grew up. I didn't have to worry about going to university or college or anything like that. All I needed to do was to find a job capable of meeting my basic needs, and then the rest of my time would be devoted to my ministry. This was the goal that was put forward. So I never once thought about seeking higher education. None of that. And
have you done any since then, or?
Oh yes, I did. And one of the things that actually may have helped in my deconversion was my ability to leave home after high school and go to school for electronics engineering.
Okay, cool.
Because I had some support from my local elder that I could pursue a career in like programming or computers or stuff like that, and maybe have my own like computer repair shop. Very low level dream sort of thing. But
a good one.
But yeah, it's a good one. But that was the limit though. Doing much more beyond that was considered dangerous behavior.
Oh wow.
Oh, very much so. And so I had to constantly be convincing people that I wasn't, about to engage in the illicit activity of learning too much. And like I was interviewed, I was constantly being asked, it was like, are you sure your faith is going to be safe? And it was like, where are you going to live when you're there? Are you going to stay with brothers and sisters, or like, are you going to try to live on your own? What's going to happen? And so eventually I found an elderly brother and sister who let me stay in their home. They rent a room from them while I went to school. And so I was never unsurrounded by witnesses, and everything was watched. And that's one of the things witnesses do. Is it is a police state. You are watched constantly. You report on the wrongdoings of those around you. It's soul crushing, is what it is, because it doesn't allow you for any expression of self. No sense of individuality. You are part of a commune, cult, whatever. And I would say it is a cult. It meets so many criteria on the bite model.
Oh yes.
That it's shocking that people don't.
I think it hits all of them.
Cults. Yeah.
Some do.
I know some do, and I know a lot of ex Jehovah's Witnesses who will easily and quickly, very readily tell you and explain why they qualify as a cult. Just the sheer control over everything in your life that it has is one of the main reasons why the Clergy Project was so helpful for me.
Can you describe the bite model for people again who don't know?
Sure. Oh, okay. Well, it's not something I could describe simply, because there's actually quite a few characteristics in each of the four categories. but it's a list used in psychology to determine whether or not you're in a high control environment, i.e.
Yes.
a cult.
Yes.
And so you take a look at the different qualities and characteristics of what it, like, how much control do they have over what you wear, what you say, where you can go, that sort of thing. And these high control environments are just devastating with regards to the psychological well-being of its members, because the entire idea is to break you of your individuality and make you assume membership in an elite community, and telling you the entire time that you should be proud of this.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
no, you shouldn't be. You should pay attention to the cognitive dissonance that's going on, to the questions in your head that are screaming at you. That when you're being told the dogma that you should be perfectly willing to allow your child to die, and if you actually then get children, and it's the last thing in the world that you would ever want is to see them die or be hurt or suffer in any way, and yet you're being told that your devotion to God is even more important than that. And so
That's unbelievable.
You have to keep shoving down all the doubts and the fears. And like high control environment, let me tell you, there's a scripture that we were always told about how God is the reader of hearts. So basically, he knows what you're thinking. And Jesus's example about how even a man who even looks at a woman lustfully has committed adultery in his heart, that sort of thing.
Ooh, I was adultering my ass off.
Yeah, well, it compounds. Like, this is, I think it's called stacking, the way they use these scriptures. Each one of them technically true in its own right, but it's in its own framework, in its own context, if you wish. But then they stack that scripture with another scripture and another scripture to create this narrative. For example, we were told as children that the ancient nation of Israel was allowed to take disobedient children to the edge of the camp, to the elders, and they could be stoned to death for their disobedience.
Yes.
We were told that the thoughts you think, disobedient thoughts, needed to be confessed, so that you could repent and turn around from your sinful thinking. And we were also told other scriptures like, no man knows the day or the hour of the end times. And so it was entirely possible. And Jehovah's Witnesses are great for always talking about the end times.
Yeah.
And so what it does is it creates this fear that any sinful thought you have can be known by God immediately. And any sinful thought you have that has not been confessed is an unrepentant wrongdoing. And unrepentant wrongdoers do not survive Armageddon, which can occur at any time, any second of the day. So you're kept in a constant state of thought control and fear of thinking the wrong thing. And so,
that's part of the bite model, right? The thought
that's
control.
all part of the bite model, is that you are a child being told that your death is imminent the moment you have a disobedient thought. And that is like, there's a word in German, and I forget how it's pronounced, but it's translated soul murder. The idea of killing like the innocent spirit within a child. And that is exactly what happens, is that your childhood is gone.
Yeah.
That's
heartbreaking.
You live a life of fear and pain and guilt, and you're constantly trying to beg for everyone's approval and constantly being told you will never be good enough. You were born imperfect. You will die imperfect. Any salvation you get is a gift from God. You're never worthy. You should have no reasons for self-respect other than what God lets you know that you should be proud of. So you're not allowed any sense of self-worth. And that's destroying.
Yep.
Because it takes an awful lot of work to rebuild your self-esteem after decades of that kind of abuse.
Do you feel that happened with you as well?
Oh, it definitely happened. And it definitely happened with my ex. And we both were attempting to confront it when we left, because we both had, her sister had been shunned for years, but she started to have kids, and my wife wanted to see her kids,
Right.
See her niece. And now she didn't want to cut off connection because she had been very close to her sister before her sister left.
Right.
And she just decided one day, it's like, this is not loving. And I was like, yeah, it's not loving, but what do you want to do? And we both talked about it, and we both agreed to leave together. And so that even if every one of our family shunned us, we were still going to be family. We were still going to have each other. And from that point forward, we were going to try to repair the relationships that we had with those people that we had condemned for years. Her sister, her father's side of the family, that sort of thing. And I was able to make contact with some of my siblings who had already left years ago, and sort of reconnect with them, even though the other half of my siblings are still locked in it, and they're unlikely to escape. But this was a path we started down. The idea of trying to teach yourself how to have a sense of self-worth and self-respect, because without that, one of the more frustrating things that was revealed, one of the counselors that she went to go to, and one of the counselors I had gone to, was that if you don't have a sense of self-respect, if you don't have self-love, when someone says they love you, it confuses you, because it's an act of, it creates a kind of cognitive dissonance. You don't know why they love you because you don't love you. And so it doesn't make any sense to you that someone would tell you that they love you. And that has to be one of the most horrible things that I know can happen, is to just be so, your self-esteem and self-respect is so beaten and crushed that you can't understand what it means when someone says they love you. Right. And you don't feel worthy of love. And that can go down many dark paths. You can start self-sabotaging relationships you're in because you don't think you're worthy. And it takes a great deal of effort to learn, to develop a proper self-care plan, to teach yourself you're okay. You've been lied to your entire life that you were imperfect and unworthy. You were a flawed vessel, incapable of being anything but a flawed vessel. And that is soul murder. It's soul crushing, and it takes a great deal of effort to rebuild after that. And not everybody does. It becomes, that was one of the things that my ex and I found, is that once we didn't have the commonality of religious doctrine to share a worldview together, we each had to start developing our own senses of personality, our own sense of self, our own self-respect, engage in our own self-care, that sort of thing. And it caused us to drift apart, where I became obsessed with rebuilding, to a point where it became probably difficult to be around me, because I was constantly engaging in counter apologetics with myself in order to have the world make sense again from the chaos that I seemed to be surrounded in. Because I was completely untethered when I left. I had an entire worldview, and then I need to rebuild one up again. And sorry, there's some sirens about to go by, I think. And
yeah, we can hear them.
The cop shop is just down the street.
Can't hear you, Mikey.
So it's convenient. So
just tell them we're not here. Just tell them we're at work.
No, they like me. So I do something for them that they don't necessarily want to do. So they chase the bad guys. I take care of the victim at the crime scene. So it's like, we're bros. We're good. And but yeah, no, it's been a difficult journey. I'm not gonna lie. And if there was any of your listeners that are dealing with, who know witnesses.
Oh, I've had many witnesses on.
Yeah, they're one of the things you need to remember is that not everyone takes it as zealously as others, but it's the truly zealous ones, the fundamentalists, the literalists, the one that take it the most seriously, are probably the ones that need your help the most.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the main things that you need to be able to do is let them understand the idea of unconditional love, because their entire existence is conditional love from everyone.
Mm-hmm.
Conditional love from your friends, from your parents, from
Mm-hmm.
all your community members. You are only loved and only considered of having any value if you comply. And if you have a witness friend, let them know that you care about them, that if they ever did decide to leave, if you could offer some sort of assistance, like give them some sort of landing pad, help them figure out how to be independent, help them figure out how to be free of an incredibly controlling environment. And that's maybe one of the greatest gifts that you could give to somebody who's been a member of a cult, is just let them know that they're not as alone as they feel.
Yes.
Yeah.
And
yeah.
that can go a great distance.
Huge, actually.
People. Yeah,
definitely. I'm going to assume here that because of what you went through, you probably found it quite easy to slide into doing what you do for the victim services.
Very much. Initially, well, the reason I ended up where I am was because in high school, my guidance counselor, it was a good school, they did aptitude testing, like what career path should you go down, that sort of thing. And I did a 1,000 question aptitude test, and it came back with three jobs. It said police detective, army officer, or engineer, because my rating in critical analysis and troubleshooting and that sort of thing, problem solving, was high. And they said good qualities for a police detective, solving crime, good qualities for an army officer, like planning military operations, that sort of thing, and good qualities for an engineer. So, of course, being a witness, there was no way I was going to become a member of the military, why risk the blood guilt of killing someone, or a police officer, same reason. So the only family-friendly choice that was there was the third option, to become a police, or to become an engineer. And electronics and computers, back in the 90s, this was the way to go. This is what you focused on. This was considered a good idea. And I got involved in some really good companies. My first job out of college, when I was done, was with a company where I traveled all over North America repairing nuclear magnetic resonance analyzers in some pretty interesting research environments, government agencies, that sort of thing. And that was a great feeling. And I eventually left that because I got married and decided to take a desk job. I started working with a company that had proprietary technology of time of flight measurements for LiDAR lasers.
I have a quick question.
Go ahead.
Can you build a nuke?
Potentially, it's the source material you have to find. But I understand how the explosion matrix works, and I understand how you would have to nest it, but you'd have to get your hands on the explosives. You'd have to chip them into the right shape. You'd have to shape the explosive charge. You'd have to have proper timing, protect yourself from neutrino drift, stop false detonation, that sort of thing. Right. Yeah, I know a bit about it.
I mean, I have a bicycle in the garage. I can make a centrifuge. I'll just turn it sideways and then
use the centrifuge. Start getting yourself some of the proper uranium.
I got to enrich the uranium, and I think a bicycle is the best.
As long as you can do that, get yourself a little bit, and there you go. So
I'll live forever.
Yeah. Well, nuclear magnetic resonance is based off of a lot of quantum mechanics, which was kind of an interesting thing to learn, because you're essentially changing the rotational spin of a particle which is
Yep.
embedded in a large magnetic field, and then you're watching the field right itself back to its native position, and that gives you a lot of information about what it is you're looking at. It's pretty high-tech stuff, used in a lot of
Pretty cool.
research equipment, but it's also used to calculate the fat content of chocolate. So, you know, you can do a lot of things with it. It has a lot of applications, and it's fascinating stuff. But I ended up in high-end optics, working in a company that made LiDAR, who had the opportunity to make a LiDAR unit for the Phoenix Mars Lander project.
Very cool.
Which landed on Mars in 2008. And so I managed to be part of that, and I did a lot of
That is badass, dude.
Nice.
I know that I have helped personally advance the knowledge of the human race. And the coolest thing about it is that the prototype that I created can be used. The model that is on Mars right now can be used as an early warning detection system for approaching sandstorms.
Cool.
So if there is future human habitation, the device I made can be used as part of the detection and protection system for colonists.
Yeah, because
That is
I
really cool.
always hate it when you're at a party on Mars and then the shitty DJ is about to play Sandstorm. I'm glad you built something.
Yeah.
Stop that.
Well, the sandstorms on
90s
Mars are
techno
dangerous, man.
stuff.
Like it's no joke up there. Those sandstorms are like walking into a sandblaster.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You know, it'll scour the skin off your bones, that sort of thing.
Because there's reduced gravity, right? So more shit
In
gets in the air.
thin atmosphere, so that the momentum of the dust doesn't slow down. It just keeps going faster and faster.
Builds.
Oh,
Yeah.
God.
And it's dangerous. Like Mars, if it was possible to cool Venus down, it would be better to go to Venus, because Mars has got some serious issues.
Oh yes.
But you know, you'd have to do some serious geoforming to get both Venus cool enough to go, or Mars warm enough to go. So
Yeah. Right now, you don't want to go to Venus. I think they just sent more probes over to Venus, though.
yeah, but those things have a very short shelf life, because the atmosphere is acidic. So anything that lands gets dissolved in a matter of a few weeks or days.
Yep. Oh yeah, and sometimes even hours, depending on what it's made out of.
Yeah, the first probe that landed there only lasted an hour or so before it.
That was the Russians, right?
I'm not sure. Were they the first ones to go?
I thought it was the Russians, and then just like fucking just land it, just fucking keep the cameras going, just crash it right into it. Let's see what we can see. And it didn't last all but a few minutes.
It gets dissolved, you know.
It is just gone, and it was like it's so hot it melts lead. Like, that's not right.
Yeah, if you landed on the surface, you'd be burned alive by liquid lead, and then you'd be eaten alive by the acid rain. I suppose it's a great way to dispose of the body.
Don't let the mob hear this. Once they figure out that they got a perfect place to put their bodies.
Oh, that just means there'll be another group that's dedicated to space race and get into another planet. It's like, we're there for, exploratory reasons. No need to worry why we brought so much.
My great grandmother used to point at that cavern over there, and now there's a bunch of shoes. Let the shoe. Well, I guess there wouldn't even be shoes. It's better than pigs.
There'd be nothing left.
It would just all go up into the atmosphere.
Everything would be dissolved.
Okay, we cannot let the mob see this episode. We cannot. If they find out.
There's already chemicals on Earth that do the same thing. You don't want to go down that path.
Shh, don't tell them.
It's a pretty dark world. Law enforcement and law and security, you learn a lot of very dark things.
Saw that guy's episode on Blacklist.
So the first probe to make a soft landing on Venus was Venera 7, which was part of the Venera program in Russia. So it was a Soviet spacecraft. And it landed and took as much information it could in the 23 minutes it survived. So there you go.
I mean, it's better than us like trying to send something into Jupiter, which is just like an epic waste of money. Like, I get that they want to do experiments, but also,
why is it a waste of money?
It's just going to die. It's going to get into all that radioactive nasty and just die. You won't get anything from it.
On Jupiter?
Yeah. I'm like, don't send it in. We'll never get the data back. It's too noisy over there.
The trick with Jupiter is that you'd have to encase the lander in like a properly formed geodesic dome.
Yes.
in which all of the pressure just basically makes it tighter and tighter and tighter, so that it could get down as far into the atmosphere as possible before it was just crushed into a dust.
Oblivion.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But I believe they want to do exactly that.
Yeah, that's one of the things that's going on.
They've got all kinds of missions that they want to do too.
Yeah.
They want to send
They want to send a subsurface probe to Europa to burrow through the ice.
Yep.
See if there's anything living under there.
Yeah, which I'll guarantee you there probably is.
I wouldn't be surprised. It's got all the requirements. I mean, everything we know about life is that it's chemical, right?
Yep.
So, and now we found all of the amino acids necessary to form proteins on asteroids in the universe.
Yep.
So.
Yep. Exactly. They're still looking for that kind of stuff up on Mars as well, and they found some of it, but they're still looking for more.
You get the impression from Mars and Venus that they were all both more inhabitable in the past than they were now.
Right.
And so it's entirely possible that there was life on Venus at one point, and global warming screwed them. And there was life on Mars at some point, but the lack of a magnetic field stripped the atmosphere away.
The core went cold, man. The core went cold.
Something like that.
Well, if the conditions are good enough, life will start.
Yes.
If the chemicals are there, life says, "Yep, we're here." And then, of course, on both of those worlds, some traumatic shit happened, and everything changed, so life couldn't survive anymore, at least as we know it. So now we were the one that was in that good spot of the Goldilocks zone where things worked out perfectly. We even have a moon here with us, so
which helps a lot.
Yep, it does. And I just learned the other day. This is kind of interesting, and I'll mention all this before we close this out and get into an after party. Apparently, the moon. People always think of the moon as the guide for the tides. It's not. However, all the water on the Earth bulges at the center.
Towards the moon.
Yeah. Well, in general, it bulges all the way around because the Earth turns.
Right.
So as the Earth spins, the water kind of bulges out at the equator. And what is actually happening is, like I just said, the Earth is turning. It's turning into the bulge.
Yep.
And that's what actually causes our tides.
If you could imagine it as the water is all staying put in one location and the land is rotating around inside of it.
Yes,
right.
Exactly.
And so, yeah.
So there you go. I always thought that my mind was blown when I heard that.
Can I drop a moon fact too?
Sure. It's not made of cheese. We already knew that, Mikey.
Well, if you're just going to I didn't even get to, I have some slides that prove that it is made of cheese. Actually, if we could pull up slide number 4, please. No, but like the moon is so big in relation to the Earth that we're kind of like a biplanetary system. And then like you see everyone else's moons, and then like you see ours like stacked up. It's like, damn, that's a big moon. You know what? Get in here, you little dwarf planet. You're with us. But it's just because it rotates around us. It wouldn't. If the moon was like running its own orbit, we'd call it a dwarf planet. We'd never call it like just a rogue satellite. But it's ours, so moon it is.
Tons of mice turn into the bulge, baby.
Gross.
And Nick made another great point. A lot of people don't actually know this. 99% of all species on Earth is extinct.
Yeah.
The species you know of here is only the 1%. Or 0.1% or whatever left, or 1.1, whatever it is.
Yep.
Imagine that. Anyway,
I'm glad they're gone.
Right?
I saw a fucking Triceratops skull when I was at the Science Center last weekend. Get rid of all of them. Send all the asteroids. Those are fucking monsters, Neil. That thing's head was like 10 feet long. I was like, oh no, that cannot just be walking around. No.
I'd kind of hope that at least some of Jurassic Park was true, and that they were just a big cow, and they were friendly.
Yeah, cows are great until they run into you or step on you.
Big ass horns, yeah.
A super cow with rhino horns and armor plating. No, he needs to die. Kill him with more rocks from space, please. Take them all out. I don't want them around anymore. They're terrifying. I saw
Mikey, they're gone. It's okay. They've been gone for a long time.
I don't know, man. They got a new movie coming out. Maybe this is their release party. Jurassic Park
you're going to be fine. Yeah.
Just kidding. They're actually back.
And Nicholas says cow farts are killing us all, which is actually the agriculture and animal sector is one of the biggest causes of the whole problem with climate. So
and they're big cows, so that just make it worse.
Yeah. But we're adding to that ourselves as well.
Right.
To be alive is to give to climate change, basically.
So we give the cows to Mars.
We can send them there. They wouldn't last long, but we can send them there. Anyway. All right. Well, Kerry, we're going to get into an after party. You're still good to join us for that for a little bit, right?
Sure.
All right. Awesome. I mean, first of all, I want to thank you very much for sharing your story with us. It's great to have you on.
For having me.
My pleasure. I'm always looking for Canadians to come on, man. I always love doing the whole Canadians thing. We get to take over for a little while. Sorry, Mikey.
I'll be up there as soon as I can convince this wife of mine.
America,
right. You're doing a great job of convincing her. You're doing a great job.
Yeah. You guys definitely have your problems. We got ours too, but you guys definitely have your problems down there too. I would hate to see your country turn into a theocracy, buddy, but it looks like that's the way it's heading.
That is a scary, scary thing. To me, in my head, that means like you all become Jehovah's Witnesses.
Yeah. Nobody wants that, Kerry.
No one wants that. No.
All right. Stephanie L. Le Habitant. Yeah, there you go. I think Stephanie's becoming a Habs fan. Okay. Well, shit, at least they made it into the playoffs. Vancouver did fuck all to get into the playoffs this year. Anyway. But we did re-sign Boudreau to be the coach, so that's cool. Anyway. Mikey, great job as usual, my friend. Do I need to say that now that you're actually like full partner? Oh, but by the way, I have stuff to discuss with you on that matter too.
Okay.
But you're still the producer, so you're double shifting stuff now. So even
I have ADD.
Awesome.
It's all the same.
All right. Artistic development, is that what?
Yes.
Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you guys out there in the chat. I'm glad you guys were here to join us for this episode. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We are getting into the after party. If you want to join us for the after party, send us a message from one of the platforms, and there is a link to it, as the little ticker tape down below says, in the description box, as well as all the stuff that we were talking about with Kerry. You can find them on Facebook. You can also find them on the victim services of SDG&A. Their website is down there as well. And I had another one down there for you too. There's 3 of them down there, guys. So check them all out.
The normalizing atheism.
That's right. The Pasta Mike's page on Facebook.
Pasta.
Yeah.
We're going to be meeting it better very soon. So that's going to be a lot of fun. So if any of y'all are going to better, we'll see you there. I already know Nick's going, and I already know student Dr. Ben's going. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Mike and I are going to be driving down there from Chicago, and I think Ben will be with us. I'm not sure if that's what's happening yet. Ben's still got some shit to work out.
Yeah, we gotta get a head count.
Yeah, and thanks, patrons. You guys are amazing. I couldn't do this without you. And until next time, guys, like I always say at the end of the interviews, like the late, great Christopher Hitchens, who we mentioned at the beginning of this, said, it's called faith because it's not knowledge. Before we go, just want to mention we are looking for some new artwork for the channel, because it's now Mikey and myself we're joining forces to be both the hosts of this show. So I think it's been a long time coming, and so we're looking for folks to come up with some new art for the channel and new logos and stuff like that. And then Mike and I will probably judge on them and see which one we like the best. And the winner will get a signed copy of my very first CD. And also we'll probably throw some cash at you too for your hard work. So until then, guys, well, I already said the tagline, so it's all good. We'll just get the hell out of here and into the after party.
It's called faith. Because it's not.
No, yeah, we've been there already. See you guys next time.